Hey, it's Bryan here. Thank you so much for tuning into the Go Be More podcast. For those of you who've never heard of Go Be More Apparel, I just want to take 30 seconds to tell you what we're about. We believe we all have a responsibility to chase our dreams, and we want to give you the motivation, the mindset, and the permission to do it. We want our apparel to be a constant reminder of your commitment to achieving your goals. And we want the words Go Be More to remind you of your dreams and your next steps every time you see them. As for this podcast, every Tuesday I speak with John Rankin, world-class miler, kidney disease survivor, and founder of Go Be More, about topics that will help to unlock your potential and get you moving forward. In this episode, John and I talk about the Process of Design Squiggle by Daniel Newman and how it's a powerful mental model for embarking on anything new. We talk about the dangers of comparing where you are on your journey to where others are, and we wrap it up with a conversation about viewing our personal skills as being a network which grows stronger as we add new ones and cultivate the connections between them. Whether you're just getting started, you want to make progress faster, or you're looking to completely change the path you're on, this episode has something for you. All right, here's me and John. Good morning, John.
Hey, good morning, Bryan.
Everything going well for you today?
So far, so good, man. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited. Ready to do this.
I'm loving our show, man.
That's good. It's good if the maker of the show is loving the show. It's not good if it's the other way around.
Well, I'm having fun doing it. How about that?
Yeah, me too. I think that today's topic, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of finding our purpose. Last week we talked about some personal stories about where we had to make some decisions based off of our priorities and how we pivoted onto sort of a different path or a different approach to what we're doing. I want to address that, and I found a really interesting, what I think of as now like a mental model called the Newman Design Squiggle, and I figured we'd talk a little bit about that and what it means, and then how it applies to our life, and I think that'll lead to an interesting discussion about how we go about finding our path. So I'd like to try and talk about that today, if you're game.
I am. No, I mean, that's obviously, I can't help it but talk about purpose and finding meaning in our everyday, our day-to-day, and so this is exciting. I really feel like this relates to all the things that we've already talked about as far as the first 4 or 5 episodes that we've recorded and the first 4 episodes that we've published. And so, yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this. I think it builds on the last conversation that we had in our last episode as well, where we talked about prioritizing and pivoting, as far as dealing with challenges, what we've learned from those challenges, and how that affected, our life path. And I think this next topic kind of, really ties into that nicely.
Yeah, I think so too. And one of the things for me is, I'm really focused on this idea of mental models and simple ways to view the world, like kind of like glasses you can put on that let you see a situation differently, right? Or frameworks that, let's say, that you can use that are very kind of simple and abstract, but they allow you to have a way of analyzing different situations. Mm-hmm. I teach classes on these in school here in Japan, and the students love it because it just gives them like tools in their tool belt for their life, right? And I've really enjoyed diving into this subject with them, and I came across something that I had never seen before last week, and it's called the Process of Design Squiggle by a designer named Daniel Newman, and this is, I'll describe it, but I'll put links in the show notes for people who are listening if they want to see the actual picture. It's just a really chaotic scribble line on the left, and then in the middle it gets a little bit narrower and the squiggle's a little bit less extreme, and then the entire right side of the picture is a straight line going off to the right. And the designer, Daniel Newman, he uses this he actually, when I say use this, he really does use this in every client presentation when he explains to his customers what the design process is going to look like when they hire him to do a new design.
That's awesome.
He uses this very exactly, right?
That's hilarious.
He makes his pitch, and he says, I assume, I've never seen his pitch, but I assume he says, and I want to show you this picture because if you understand this picture, you're going to understand how this design process works. In the beginning, it's chaotic and it's all over the place. It's a period filled with research and ideas and experimenting and playing around with things, and it's chaos. It's all over the place. It doesn't make any sense. Over time, as we've explored all these different ideas, we start to narrow down onto a concept or a prototype of what we think the right design is. And then once we've identified that, we follow the path of building out that design to perfection. Right. And so if you see it, going from left to right from time, it's like you go through this period of chaos and messiness, and it slowly gets refined down into a final design. And he, as a tool, he uses this to explain to his clients, and it gives his clients a very simple mental image when they are thinking about what's going on and they don't understand maybe what he's doing or what his process is. It gives them something to think about and refer to and say, oh no, he explained this. It's, of course we don't understand what's going on right now because they're still trying to figure out what the right idea is, or something to this effect.
That's so genius. Because that makes life so much easier in the beginning of something, because in the beginning of anything, it always feels like that. I don't know what's going on. Even when you start something and you think you know what's going on, it's still chaotic until you really get into a rhythm, to get your flow, and you know what you're doing and what you want to do, and what challenges you have to overcome along the journey with anything. I think that just that kind of explanation makes it really easy to accept that things aren't necessarily going to be completely clear when you begin something new.
Yeah, I was thinking about this just before we got started, and I did this in 5 seconds before we got started. I wrote down, the coronavirus has basically done this to all of us, right? It's just created this, or you can define it to the scientists trying to find a vaccine. They're all about ideas and experimenting, and they're trying to do all these different things, and slowly they're going to narrow down on what makes the most sense as an area to target, right? Because these other ideas just didn't work at all, and these other ones have potential, and they're going to narrow down, and they'll figure out something, and then at that point it'll be all about executing to perfection on that effective vaccine. That's as an example.
Yeah, and we're really all paying attention to it right now. That's all. So it seems almost crazier to us than it ever has been. It's always been like this. It's just that we're just like hyper focused on it. So this is the normal process. And again, I think this is a really good way to explain it.
Yeah. So if you see chaos in some process, and you don't understand that chaos is a necessary part of the process, and that's what the beginning stages of most things are like, it's very easy to look at it and be like, I don't have any faith in this. I don't know what these guys are all over the place, right? I don't understand what they're doing. There's no sense to this. And actually, it's because in the early stages, it's more about ideas and experimenting and research and trying everything possible. And that doesn't look clean because it's just not, right? But I was thinking other things that just are sort of funnier ideas about how you can use this design squiggle idea of chaos narrowing down to a straight line. And if you think about dating, right? When you start dating and you're like, a teenager or something, and you're trying to date with people and nothing, it's terrible. The whole experience is chaotic and messy, and it's such highs and lows, and it's all over the place. And over time, you start to find maybe, the person who's the right person for you, and your relationships narrow down, your options, you know what you were looking for, and then you find the person, and that's who you're with, right? Like it sort of tells that story in a very abstract way, in a very simple image, totally. Right?
Yeah.
When you're trying to form a new team or a new band or a new orchestra or something like this, all these people coming together in the beginning. What's your role on the team? What's everybody's role? What's the strategy? What are we going to do? It's messy. It's all over the place, and everybody has to figure out how to work together and how to get the most out of things together. And then over time, you figure out this is what's going to work for this team, for this group of people, for this time in their lives, and you find the right strategy or the right plan, and then you execute, right? And I just found this simple image to be so much more flexible than just describing the design process. And the first thing that came to me is like, we had this conversation last week about prioritizing our lives and making a pivot. And I saw this design squiggle image, and I thought to myself, that's kind of what it's like when you're trying to figure out what path you're supposed to be on. In the beginning, it's all about experimentation and learning and trying new things and having new experiences. And as you have those experiences, and as you meet different people, and as you just live your life and try all these different things, you start to realize that there's certain things you like and certain things you don't. And so it narrows itself down naturally as to what you're doing. But it also narrows down because your life circumstances are what they are, right? You might find that you just don't have as many options as someone else in terms of what your paths are going to be in that short term, because you're constricted by a lack of money, right? You're constricted by a lack of where your geography, where you're at, whatever the reason is. You have some limitations that are imposed on you, and this process you're going to narrow down, and you're going to end up following a path. And the ultimate question to me was how much sort of like agency you take on determining that path for yourself, and how and the quality of the experimentation that you do in the early stages, and how much that affects what paths become open to you and what opportunities are available to you. And so that's like, when I saw that, I thought to myself, I felt like it was a very simple image that can be used to understand this process that we sort of talk about a lot in Go Be More, in terms of chasing your dreams and finding your purpose and improving your life on a step-by-step basis.
Well, I think that's what's so unique about what we're doing too, is that with Go Be More, I mean, it's full transparency. I mean, obviously we're an apparel brand, and we want to be really good at selling apparel and designing apparel and understanding that whole world. But we, both you and I, and honestly our entire team, we're all kind of like learning as we go, but we're learning quickly because we're so passionate about our brand and our story. And that lends itself to being also very passionate about, and honestly, I think we all kind of have an interest in clothing, and the role that clothing can play in impacting how you think and feel on a day-to-day basis. We keep saying, like, one of the phrases we use is wear your goals. Wear your goals on your sleeve, or adorn yourself with your goals and dreams, because when you put it on yourself, it's almost like putting on like this superhero costume or something, and that's going to be your when you put that on, when you put on a Go Be More hat or shirt or something, that's going to be the thing that gives you the superpowers to achieve your goals and your dreams. And so we see that in what we're doing, but and we see that beautiful value in the brand, but at the same time, it's been very chaotic in a lot of ways. I had a lot of stuff going on in my life, a lot of things where I'm just like all over the place in my own head, in my own heart, in my own life, and a lot of my own personal struggles, which lends to the chaos of, at the same time as that was going on, we're trying to grow this business, and I think you handled it very well. I think in many ways, this is something that conceptually you probably already had in your own head, as far as like, this is the way things go. This is part of life. It doesn't matter. If you want something and you're going to do something, this is just the better you can handle things like this when it's kind of chaotic. Eventually, this is going to sort itself out. And if you can stick through it, it's going to get smoother, clearer, and you're going to be that much more efficient and productive. And I feel like that's what we're seeing with Go Be More, a little over a year after diving into it together and looking at it and breaking it apart, putting it pieces together and starting to launch it and put it together. And the more we've dived into it, the clearer things have become. And the more we've also, I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we're embracing the process and the journey and accepting that, which is allowing us to also find greater clarity in the chaos that remains, which there's still a lot there. But that's allowing us to find greater clarity because we're just going through, checking doors and seeing what's open. Oh, that's not the path. This is the path. Or that's not the path. This is the path. And just inching our way forward. So the concept for me, it immediately simplifies and almost makes me feel better about going through and struggling with and feeling like things are chaotic with certain parts of my life or certain things in my life, other things not so much. But I could look back and say, why is it not so chaotic in this part of my life versus something else, and go, oh, because this is where I'm at. And that's design, this Newman design helps me to actually conceptualize that, to visually see, oh, this is how this is supposed to go. So I'm where I'm supposed to be with this or that. And it's okay, because it's going to work out. I just got to give it time and I got to stick with it.
It's funny that of all this time I spent thinking about this stuff, like I actually had not made the connection already between this sort of little squiggle and our journey on Go Be More. I sat down, I wrote on a list of all these different things, and then you said it to me right now, and I thought, oh, well, that's dumb. I never even thought about it. But you're absolutely right. I think we're so early, we're so young as an organization, and we are trying to find the path that makes the most sense for us. And we've been doing a lot of experimenting. We've been doing a lot of learning, and
Totally.
I think I think we're at this process. If you really think about it, we're still way over on the left side in the experimentation stage. We have sort of a long-term goal, but we haven't really narrowed down on the path that we're confident this is exactly the path we need to be on. It's like in marketing and startups, they always talk about a startup has to find product market fit, right? And you make a product in the beginning. You might have an idea of what it's going to work, but often the first idea isn't exactly what works, and you have to experiment to the point where you find that niche that really works for your customer base, for example.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And every time I think about this now, I think about this design squiggle, and it makes it very easy to imagine a long-term process. And as you said, we are very early, right? We're still in the experimentation stage. We've tried some things that haven't so much worked. We may come back to them because the idea itself was good, but our execution wasn't quite there, and we need to figure out how to do that better. And I think we're in this slow process of narrowing down, and I like that a lot because it makes me feel much more comfortable about the fact that we're not when we haven't just because we haven't found that path doesn't mean what we're doing is bad or unnecessary or wrong or anything. It's actually very necessary, and it's going to take a little bit more time. But as we really find exactly the right path, all that work and stuff we're doing now is going to be what leads us to find it when we do find it.
Yeah, and exactly. And so it's you getting to that place of feeling like okay with where you're at is really important. And when you're saying that, it makes me think of that quote. I was watching some dude on YouTube who is like a YouTube marketer guy. So I was trying to understand and learn more about YouTube, right? Because I want to help us to grow our YouTube channel. So I'm like, this guy's pretty cool. He's got some cool stuff. I mean, he's literally doing what we're doing right now, is sitting at a desk in front of a microphone in his house and making YouTube videos that are getting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views, because people want to learn about YouTube marketing. So it's kind of a good thing to focus on if that's what you really want to do. Anyways, he said this really cool quote though, because he's talking about the beginning of growing his YouTube channel. He's like, I was not getting this many views in the beginning. And in fact, it took a long time for this to really work out. And now I'm a keynote speaker. I do all this stuff for what I'm doing with these videos and this business that I've developed, teaching people how to do YouTube marketing stuff. But it wasn't like this in the beginning. And one of the things that I know a lot of people are doing is comparing their beginning to somebody else's middle. He says, I'm at the middle right now. He says, I don't think I'm where I want to be, even though I'm getting millions of views, and that's cool. He says, I'm not where I want to be. So don't get it twisted. Like, I still have a long ways to go, even if it looks great. But he says, the thing that I want you to know is, because I'm trying to teach you, my audience, how to grow your YouTube channel, right? And to become good at YouTube marketing. He says, you got to understand that if you compare yourself to where I'm at, and you're at the beginning or kind of just starting, or have been doing it for a while, but you've been struggling, you haven't invested the time to really learn and get better at this, and you're comparing where you're at right now to where you want to be, and also comparing it to where I'm at or somebody like me is at, he says, you're setting yourself up for frustration and failure, because that's not a fair comparison. He says, that's not fair at all, because what you're discounting is what it took for me to get from where you're at to where I'm at. And so you have to be easier on yourself, because you got to go through the crazy before you get to that little bit of a smoother, cleaner line in terms of the Newman design, if you're using that visual to help understand the process that you have to go through. So again, that quote was, don't compare somebody's middle to your beginning, because that's just not fair.
I think that's 100% right. And, we've had this conversation, if not on the podcast, about this, because, we're getting started on a podcast, and we both listen to podcasts, and there's people I've probably listened to for 5 to 10 years. And of course the quality and the smoothness and the way they speak and their ability to do a podcast, it feels so natural. It's so well developed, and we're just kind of learning, right? So you told me this before in the same way. It's, don't compare like somebody who's far into it with where we're at right now, because
Yeah, I used my Alan Webb story. I talked about that before, where Alan Webb is even though he was a peer and a rival, I mean, he's a hero of mine. I love Alan Webb. He's the American record holder in the mile. For those of you who are not runners and don't know who Alan Webb is, look him up. He's an amazing athlete, ran one of the fastest mile times of all time, and he's just a great human being. And I grew up at the same time as Alan Webb. We're in the same age group, and I was telling Bryan that I said, well, I wasn't where Alan Webb was, and I wanted to be a sub 4 minute miler. I wanted to break 4 minutes in the mile in high school, and that was just a dream of mine. But I wanted to continue on to do other great things after high school. But that was just like, I was such a big dreamer at a young age, and still am now. But I was like, that was a big goal, and I'm like, I want to break 4, and breaking 4 was just so crazy, even especially at that time in the late 90s. I was, high school from 1996 to 2000. So I was like, man, I want to be a sub 4 minute miler. And Alan Webb did it. He broke 4 minutes in the mile while in high school. And it was a really crazy thing to see, because he's like, I think just a couple years younger than me. And this high school kid's running like 3 minutes and 53 seconds. I mean, an absurd time for anybody, much less like a 17, 18-year-old kid. And I could easily have said, and again, keep in mind, I was like a 4:09 miler in high school, 4 minutes, 9 seconds. This kid was like 16 seconds faster than me, and yet he was where I wanted to be. Now, I could have easily have said, oh man, I'm not there. Look at this guy, he's my age. I could started focusing on that, right? And started beating myself up. And every day dwelling on that. Imagine thinking about that every day. He's better than me. He's not where I'm at. Oh my God, look at where I'm at. This is terrible. If you think that that's going to actually help me to get to where I wanted to be or where I ended up being, you're completely fooling yourself. I had to think the exact opposite. I said, he's having his time now, and someday I'm going to have my time. I haven't gone through what I needed to get through, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but I know that someday I'm going to have my moment. So Alan Webb, good for you, man. Go do your thing. I love it. Keep crushing it. One day we're going to race and I'm going to kick your butt, and that never really happened. Alan Webb was always a little bit better than me. Sometimes a lot better than me. But, I got to race him. I got to compete with him. I became pretty good friends with him, when we were on the circuits and stuff. Again, like I said, to this day, I still admire the guy, but I was doing that, and of course, Alan Webb has no idea, especially at that time, who I was. So even funnier, it's like, imagine beating yourself up about somebody that you want to compete against, that you could be comparing yourself to, who has no idea who you are. And they're like having this huge impact on your life. And I'm like, he instead became an inspiration instead of a negative, because I didn't compare myself to where he was at. He's on his own journey. And that's the whole point of me sharing that story. We are all on our own journey. And so we have to remember that no matter where somebody else is at or where we're at, we're on a journey. And we have to really work hard to pay attention to where we're at in our journey, so that way we can keep moving forward in our journey towards the goals and the destinations that we have for ourselves that are our dreams, And you just got to be patient with yourself and never lose faith or give up, because it's just a process. How far you go, you don't know. But if you give up, I guarantee you, where you stopped, where you gave up, that's it. That's as far as you're going to go. So just don't give up and trust the process, because comparison is definitely the death of anybody. You won't get anywhere if you spend your time trying to be just like somebody else is, because that's not who you are and that's not where you are. You are where you are. You need to be where you are, and you need to work from that place and focus on working from that place. And I guarantee you, I think you'll have way more success and achieve the things that you're setting out to achieve, because you're putting your mental energy in a much better, more productive space.
So when you talked about these comparisons, one of the things that stands out to me is this idea of being in competition with someone else on some sort of defined like terms. And that's always true in sports, for example. Like artificially, sports is literally designed to create sort of a very specific criteria that you're going to compete against, and you're going to see who's the best. That's the whole point of sports. But the reality of most of our lives is that we're in competition with others. It's not that everybody is expected to follow exactly the same path, and it's a matter of competing and comparing yourself to the best and trying to be the best in some predefined path. The reality of our lives is that the paths are also up to us to create. Like, we can create our own paths, and we don't have to be competing or comparing ourselves to somebody else on like a one-to-one comparison. For example, like our podcast, there are podcasts out there that are very, very popular and successful. And if we're thinking about our podcast, we can choose to compare to them on certain metrics, but we don't have to evaluate everything about our podcast based off the terms that they've already created for what makes them successful. The better approach for us is not to try to be like the best podcast. It's to try to be the most unique podcast in our area that we're interested in doing, right? There's a quote we're talking about sometime in the last week. It's like, don't try to be the best, be the only. And I really like that, because we don't really have an option to be somebody else. You have to be yourself. You are the only one of you. And it's easy to get caught up in feeling like, I need to be like this person. This person is successful in this way, so if I can be more like them, I will be successful. But you're setting yourself up for failure if you take that approach, because most of the time the reasons that those people are successful in their niches are because they've cultivated a certain set of skills and talents that are very suited to both them and their circumstances. And the real challenge for us is to find what that is for us, like to have our own path, to find exactly what it is meant to be. It can be like other people's paths, but it doesn't have to be the same path.
Everybody's path has to be unique. It has to be unique, because if you try to like make somebody else's path exactly yours, you're going to have a hard time, being successful. And I think you're going to even have a harder time being happy, because you're trying to be something that you're just not. Like, be who you are. That's so much easier, than trying to be somebody else, because you don't even know what's in their head. You don't know what's in their heart. You don't know what they're truly made of. Even all the way down on a cellular level, you're not them. So I think that trying to be anything other than you is a setup for failure, 100%.
I would say too, often you look at somebody who's incredibly successful at what they're doing and you think, man, that's what I want to be. And if you actually got to know that person, many times they're feeling trapped, and they're on a path that like their success has trapped them on a path, and they're not actually happy with it. They're benefiting in some sense, maybe financially or materially or something. But if you see the number of people who are unhappy in success, it's often because the path that they're on was a path that they chose for reasons that maybe they were right in the beginning. I don't want to say they were the wrong reasons, but they over time, what their interest or their passion or what they're meant to be doing has changed, right? And now go ahead.
Yeah, as I say, I have 2 points to that. I think that the first one, I want to talk about, reference really quickly when you talked about working for Apple. You said for about 7 or 8 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about that. But the other thing too is it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. When you do see people successful, if they have an end goal and they really focus on that end goal, it might be the wrong motivation. But if they're like, hey, I'm trying to get rich, and you can, and I'm not knocking these people for doing what they're doing, because they're making money doing it. But for me, it's kind of a turnoff when I see a lot of these ads popping up for people saying that they can help everybody get super rich by, selling, paid ads and all that stuff. And I'm like, I kind of look at it and I go, even if that was true, that's not for everybody. I don't care how easy it is to make the money, because I'm kind of like, man, are you serious? Like, that's not cool. Like, you're actually really good at it, so why don't you just do it? Why are you advertising that you can teach everybody else how to do it? It's almost like, it makes me feel like the reason why you're making money is because you're good at telling people that you can help them make money doing this. But in actuality, I highly doubt that everybody that you're convincing to buy into your program is actually not only doing it, but sticking with it. You know what I'm saying? Because that's a business. A business is a business. And if you don't want to do the business and that's not your passion, you should not be doing that business, no matter how much money you're getting, because you're going to quit. You're going to quit,
Yeah.
and you're not going to do the work when it gets hard. You're going to give up, and I'm just like, so for me, I see there's a lot of stuff out there that convinces people that other people are successful, that they're happy because they're successful. And ultimately, the reason why they're successful is because they had a specific end goal. They achieved that end goal. And now, are they happy is the other question. Successful is usually deemed as, oh, you got a lot of money. Okay, so you got a lot of money. Are you happy? Because what got you there is not necessarily going to be the thing that's going to keep you there. You know what I mean? Like, your end goal was to get the money. And now that you got the money, what's next? And I think that if you're doing something that makes you happy and you're on a different path, that I believe that almost every path can lead to financial wealth nowadays, because people are getting paid for their passions. And that's why I like things like Etsy, things like Amazon, these different sites where you can actually share your passions, share your creativity, share the things that you're good at. People can then buy that and support you continuing to do that. That's so cool. I mean, that's why these online e-commerce stores are super cool. That's why Shopify is cool. That's why Squarespace is cool. I mean, we use Squarespace. All this stuff is cool because it's for people that want to start their own business. But you should be starting businesses that you're actually that you would do for free, regardless of whether or not people are paying you. And that's where I think you're going to be not only more successful, but you're going to sustain the work that you're doing, because you would do it for free anyway. And you're going to work harder. You're going to try to learn more. You're going to do right by your customers. You're going to feel more obligation to being, transparent and truthful in the work that you're doing as a business. And I think that's more sustainable, And so I definitely highly recommend not trying to do stuff just because you have a specific end goal that would lead to better financial situation, because ultimately money can go away in the blink of an eye. A business can be destroyed in the blink of an eye. And the only thing you have is your integrity and your happiness. And if you give up both, I don't know what else you really have to stand on as far as just being okay with yourself. And I would definitely not want anybody to, I think, get lost in what's so easy to get lost in nowadays. And that's what we're seeing a lot on the internet. And that bothers me, and just really quickly, your story about the Apple thing and making a decision to walk away and pursue other opportunities, to go to Italy and live that dream that you and your wife shared. I thought that was so cool, because you obviously could have stayed at Apple. You were already successful at Apple. I know you would have continued to be successful, climbed the ladder there. And, obviously you can do really well in terms of making money there, but you had the consideration of doing something else that would make you maybe happier and give you a richer life experience outside of that particular experience. And you didn't knock working at Apple, because obviously that's an amazing opportunity. But you asked the question, what else is there? And then you decided to answer that question. And that's what led you to leave and pursue something else. And meaning your other dreams that you have for yourself and that you share with your wife. And that was, I think, really cool. And now, honestly, I think I'm benefiting from it because I get to do Go Be More with you. So I think that was great. And we'll see where this goes. But I believe we're going to be successful,
Yeah, of course. I do too. And I think what stands out to me is you made this comment that there's so many tools today that allow you to be successful if you're following your passions. And there's so many opportunities, so many avenues that you can explore. And it actually kind of connects me to the thing I wanted to get to, which is how to, if we go back to the design squiggle, right? We're talking about this design squiggle. It's chaotic on the left and it gets a little bit narrow in the center as you try to target down where you really want to be focusing your energy. And then the right side is a straight path. And that's about executing and doing it, right? And carrying it out. There's two thoughts, like what you described, my decision at Apple, your decision that we talked about in the last podcast to quit running and then, and eventually continue running, but under a different like mental approach to it. Those are sort of, to me, examples of where you're on a path, and the path is you're on that straight line on the side, and you decide, you know what, I'm gonna get off this path and I'm gonna go try to get on another one, right? To do that, it requires you, in some sense, to jump back into the chaos, right? Or to, maybe the other path is already defined and you can hop onto it, but often I think it means you got to get back into the experimenting and trying and doing something different. And from my experience, that's what it was. Now, there's a more fundamental question, and it's something I'm really passionate about, which is when you're in that initial stage of experimenting and trying new things and deciding what it is you want to do with your life, what's the best way to do that? And I think this question is really important because some of those experiences are going to be outside of your control. You know, if you I grew up in a very small town in the desert. I didn't have an opportunity to experience life in New York City or something like that. That's not where I grew up. My experience growing up was confined to where I lived. It created different opportunities, right? So there's certain things, say like your geography or your financial situation, that are sort of determining your opportunities. But I really believe that we can be proactive and strategic about how we approach this process of defining or figuring out who it is we want to be. And
okay. Yeah.
The way I think about this is actually as using this time to develop what I call our personal skills network or network of skills. Like, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of a network, and I think it will make a lot of sense, because if you think about a network, we often think about networks like social networks, right? Like that's where you hear the word all the time, like a Facebook. And the thing about a network is that a network is a bunch of individual nodes, but a bunch of individual items all connected. And the thing that makes a network big and strong is two factors: how many people, if you think of a social network, how many people are on the network, and then how many connections are there between them. So the biggest social network, Facebook, has 2 billion people on it, and who knows how many trillion connections, right? And that's what makes it so powerful. If you want to create a social network to rival Facebook, good luck, because how are you going to get to the point where your network has that many connections and is that strong? It takes something really amazing. So the strength of a network is in the combination of how many individuals or how many sort of things are in it, and how well they're connected. I really love this way of thinking about skills. I like thinking of our personal skills as being a network of skills, because the more skills we have, and I define skills very generally. I mean, skills can be, knowledge of a certain topic. It could be a certain talent you have, like if you were 7 feet tall, that's a skill, right? You it's an ability that you have to, that might give you a better chance in volleyball or basketball or something, as opposed to somebody else. But it could be anything from your finances to your relationships, to topics you're interested in, to your ability to focus and learn new topics, new things, to your passion, your motivation, whatever. All these things, I have a very loose general definition of what the skills are. But the more you have, and the stronger they are, and the most important thing is the more they interconnect with each other, the more opportunities it creates for you to find a unique path that is both valuable and profitable and interesting for you. And most importantly, sort of unique to you. That's something that you're not competing with other people on their terms. You're able to create a path that is a high value, high passion path for yourself that is unique to you, because you've developed this unique network of skills that complement each other and make you uniquely suited to pursue that path.
I have an example.
Sure.
Our friend and supporter and in many ways consultant for Go Be More on the video side, Von Ware of Ware Studios. Hopefully we can interview Von sometime, because he's actually, just popped in my head. I was thinking, man, what's a good example of what Bryan's describing? Okay, Von Ware, because Von Ware is an Olympic triple jumper for the United States. He's retired now. But I think he's contemplating a comeback. I think he was telling me. I don't know. But he's actually an amazing videographer, cinematographer, and photographer. His unique skill set that makes him actually extremely valuable and unique in the industry that's extremely competitive in film, entertainment, and sports entertainment is the fact that he is a world-class athlete that actually has... So his skill set is so well developed that he actually is capable of doing the work of a full team by himself. He's mastered the software. He's mastered the hardware. He's a visionary. He understands his clientele so well that he knows how to get them to do things that other professional photographers, videographers, and cinematographers just can't get done. And he's also able to produce the work, the final product faster than teams are because he's a master at all those things. He's actually mastered his skill set. And he tells me all the time, he says, Jon, the reason why I have this advantage is because of my background as an athlete and how I'm applying that to coach the subject in front of the camera. I also know what to look for behind the camera, so I know what to shoot for, so I'm able to get my shots faster. And he says, I'm also able to apply the work ethic to the work that I'm doing, so that's a huge advantage as well. Other numerous skill sets that he has developed from various things that he's developed over time, and that he's now able to connect to be this amazing videographer, super successful. He's done commercials. You guys have seen all kinds of stuff that he's done. If you want to see his work, go to his Instagram page. He's got like 90,000 followers, and it's growing all the time. And all his Gatorade, Nike, NFL commercials. I mean, this guy's done all kinds of stuff. He continues to work with amazing companies and individuals, but this dude has built his own thing, and he came from that background, but he's applied all of that to create this unique value proposition that proves itself every time he gets a project. It proves itself, and then everybody, he tells me, the response to it from these industry's experts is, it's like they can't believe that he's able to do it with the skeleton crew of 2 or 3 people, like himself and a couple interns sometimes. And he's like, yeah, I'm able to crush it, but I've mastered my skill set and my different skill sets and my different experiences to create this unique value proposition as a videographer, cinematographer, and photographer. And he knows who he really wants to work with the most, which is athletes. So it's an amazing thing. And I'm truly seeing that. I honestly believe that his journey was not as clear as it is today, but he went through the chaos. He created this thing and designed this thing through his experiences that's all come together, that he's pieced together to now have this beautiful skill set that allows him to work for himself and to choose projects that he wants and to create things that he wants to create in his now chosen profession that he's been doing for many years now, and it's amazing to watch.
So we need to get Vaughn on here, and it'll be interesting to pick his brain about this because, I would love to know, but I'm going to make some guesses. And I just think back when he was an athlete, he had an idea of what he wanted to do, but he was focused on being an athlete, but he started developing these skills in videography. He started pursuing understanding this stuff at a time when he wasn't dependent on it for his income, but it was he was actively cultivating the skills that he would need to transition into this type of work.
Yep.
And that is the key thing. I think even now when we talk with him, he will say that he's continually looking for the next skill that's complementary to what he's doing so that he can develop it. Like
without a doubt.
To take his business in another direction or to expand new opportunities. The key thing about it to me is that Vaughn didn't try to be, I don't even know what the best example is. He didn't try to be who else is out there. He looked and saw that he could follow his passion, which is the sports and the videography and this type of work, but to do it in a way that created a unique niche for himself so that he wasn't trying to be just the best. He was trying to be the only person who was doing what he's specifically doing, right? And when you can create that niche, there are hundreds of thousands of ways to make money if you are unique and provide high value, quality content or output, for lack of a better word, whatever it is. If you have a unique set of skills, you're going to be much more employable in the corporate world. If somebody is good at doing data analysis, but you're good at doing data analysis and presenting and speaking in front of people and writing and these other skills, you are going to be the person that this big company wants to hire. And
good example. That's a good point.
If you don't want to go into the corporate world, all those skills together are going to help set you apart in whatever way you choose to set yourself apart, whichever way you choose to emphasize it and whichever opportunities you choose to pursue. They're going to set you apart and sort of help you to define your niche and what makes you different from the other people who are out there. You, Jon, are a public speaker, and you're a great public speaker, but you're not the same public speaker as anybody else out there. You have a unique background. Your background is an Olympic miler. You have a kidney disease that you've gone through that is unique experience, and yours particularly is unique with your treatments and stuff. You have a lifetime of experiences from childhood that just define you. I put those in your skill network, not because you purposely cultivated those experiences, but our experiences define us, and that includes the experiences that we don't get to choose, right? That growing up in San Diego for you wasn't your choice, but it also defines who you are, and it gives you a unique point of view. It gives you a unique set of life experiences that you can draw from, right?
Yeah, that's great. I love that. It's a good point.
How we take these and how we mold them is not 100% up to us, but we can be strategic about it. Like, we can actually take a look at the things that we know we're interested in, and we can actively pursue developing skills that are complementary to skills we already have, or they're complementary to things that we're already interested in, like what we're passionate about or motivated about, or they're complementary to, maybe, let's just say, something that our best friend's skill is, because we want to work together with them. I remember this story about U2, the band U2, Bono and Edge, and I don't know the other guys' names because probably should. I like U2, but anyway,
I know, I love U2. I love U2 as well. I'm terrible when it comes to music and remembering lyrics and band members' names. And it's like, my favorite band is Coldplay, and honestly, I don't think I know anybody else's name except for Chris Martin. So I always feel bad about that.
So, but one of the stories I heard about U2, which might even not be true, but I feel like I heard this, is that they were in like middle school and they decided to form a band, and none of them knew how to play any instruments, but they just knew they wanted to form a band. And Edge learned to play the guitar, and the other guy learned to play the drums, and the other guy picked up the guitar, and they learned how to play their instruments and become a band together, because they decided to become a band, and they chose complementary roles to be a band together. If that story is not true, that's fine. The example that I'm trying to get to is more that you can choose to pursue developing a skill because it's complementary to something else you already have. You already can do. It's complementary to another skill you already have, or another part of your network, right? And I think this is really important, because if you're say you're a high school student or a college student, and you're really young and you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, you can strategically pursue developing certain skills, and I think you can do this without feeling like you're wasting your time if you don't pursue that career. Like, learning videography while you're in college is a great skill to learn, because you don't know where you're going to use it in your life. You might go down a whole different path of working. Let's just say you go down a path of working in construction, because your family has a construction business, and you follow the path and you take over your family's construction business. But those years you spent just messing around in videography might make a huge difference to opportunities that you can see for yourself in construction, right? It's going to give you a different way of viewing your own life and your world, and what opportunities are out there for you. And it's going to give you insight into how other industries work and how you can work with them. And there are certain skills, I believe, open more doors than others. That's the other thing I would say about this. And so when we think about a network, you have your network of skills, and a network is it's only as strong as the number of nodes in the network and the number of connections. But within every network, there are certain skills in our lives that I call multiplier skills. And these multiplier skills are really important, because not only do they connect to so many other aspects of our life, they have the ability to create a strong connection. They multiply those other skills, and they have an outsized effect on the opportunities that they create. And so that's what I feel like when you're in that period of trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, or you're working and you're on a path and you're thinking you want to get off of that path, there are certain skills that we can be proactive about choosing to focus on studying them and developing them, and they will be more likely to open up new paths for us that are filled with, better opportunities.
I agree. And when I was looking up something, just because I wanted to talk about what I was thinking was, man, it's really good advice to, anybody graduating from any, honestly, I think high school and college, especially if you're graduating right now, or even if you're not, but those younger people, especially when you're graduating, you're trying to figure out what to do next or what to focus on. And I think you got to keep exploring and seeking out definitely skill sets that you see value in, that, again, you are passionate about, so you'll actually, learn it and at least get pretty good at it, at least establish a good foundation to keep improving at it, because you don't know where it's going to lead, and when an opportunity presents itself for that specific skill set that might also complement other things that you have, but if you were missing that one skill set, you might not get that opportunity because you'll be disqualified in the eyes of the person giving you the opportunity or the business giving you the opportunity. So one skill set can open up the door for you to be able to do more of the other things that you are more passionate about. But because you have that extra skill set or those other skill sets that kind of work together and complement one another that you are developing instead of just that one thing that you really want to do, you definitely are going to create more opportunities for yourself. And one of the coolest examples out there is this guy named Carlin Isles. He's the fastest rugby player in the world, a U.S. Olympian, ex-NFL football player, pro sprinter, and he's sponsored by all kinds of people like Red Bull, I think DHL. But anyways, the coolest thing about this dude is I think the thing I remember about his story, and I haven't looked at it in a while, but I've seen videos of this guy a long time ago, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this dude is so flipping fast. And I didn't know what his background was. But when I started digging a little bit deeper and I found out, wait, this guy used to be an NFL player, but it wasn't really working out, I think, as well in the NFL. And then somehow he got into rugby, and then he ended up being like this crazy rugby player because his speed translated so much better to rugby. And he is unstoppable, this guy. And he's literally, without a doubt, unquestionably considered by everybody, and including his peers, the fastest rugby player in the world. But I guarantee you, this guy probably wasn't playing rugby when he was a kid. He was probably focused on becoming an NFL football player and or possibly a world-class sprinter.
Yep.
Because he's ridiculously fast. And all these things that he was doing, though, to become a better, more rounded athlete and all this other stuff has totally was transferable and applicable to and helpful to him becoming the best rugby player in the world. I think there's other aspects to this guy that makes him such a great sprinter and obviously a great rugby player. Outside of sports-related stuff, I'm sure there is. I'm sure he's a really creative person. I think a lot of these world-class people, and one thing, typically has a lot of creativity that he probably nurtures in some way, shape, or form, whether it's art or music or something. But without a doubt, this dude was developing skills and things in other sports that allowed him to translate into another sport that I'm pretty sure he was not ever thinking about, but just somehow got word of it, got pulled into it, and it clicked. All the other stuff he was doing just all of a sudden made the most sense there. I don't know if that's the best example, but it sure as heck is pretty cool to think this dude I guarantee you, he was not thinking about rugby. Most kids who start with football or make it to the NFL, their focus was making it to the NFL. And I think if I remember his story correctly, it wasn't working out there, and somehow he got pulled into rugby, and thank goodness he did, because that guy is so fun to watch.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's a lot of these cases. When you were talking, the Rock, Dwayne Johnson came up in mind. Like I know he wanted to be a football player. His dad was a wrestler.
Another great example.
So he grew up in this world of wrestling. He knew wrestling. He understood it. He wanted to be a football player. It wasn't working out perfectly. He ends up going into wrestling, but he's got such a personality that he really thrived in that setting. And he developed more skills and created more opportunities for himself to start getting bit roles in movies. And he kept developing different aspects of himself. And he had maybe he had other connections and opportunities that opened doors that are harder for other people to open. Who knows? I don't know his story that much detail, but you can look at famous people. And when you look at famous people, you almost always see that they have a unique combination of skills that make them, that sort of define why they're successful in the niche area that they're successful in. Yeah. Actors aren't all the same actors. In fact, if you are exactly the same actor as multiple other actors, you're going to have a hard time ever becoming a great, really famous or breaking out, because what sets actors apart is what makes is the unique aspect, what they bring to their roles is something unique about the way they do their craft. I just had this experience, I had this experience at Apple. The people who had a unique combination of skills were more valuable and were brought into more projects, were brought into more meetings, were brought into more opportunities, because their combination of skills made them a valuable contributor to more opportunities, to more situations.
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
In everything you're doing, I think there's a So the key thing for me is, I think in the future, actually, maybe in the next episode we go through this. I want to kind of talk more about these skills a little bit, because I think they're really important, and I think these are an area that I think a lot of people can really improve their lives. But I think it's a longer topic, so let's save it for another one.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly say it, it's all about, like, when we say go be more, that is what it's all about, is continuing to grow, continuing to improve, continuing to work on yourself, never settling for where you're at, because deep down inside, we all know where we really want to be is still a ways off, and we're still working towards that. And we need to constantly be reminded and inspired and motivated to keep working on ourselves, to go be more, because we know that we want to improve. We know we could do better. And we say it all the time, but we just didn't use the words. And in my opinion, I think we found the 3 words that we've all been saying when we say, oh, I think I could have done better. Or, you know what, I'm going to do this because I want to keep growing. We want to go be more. We all do. And that's developing these skills, seeking out these skills, putting it out there, actually stating it clearly, what you're stating, which is so exciting, is that there's so much value, and there actually is a purpose for doing that. And a lot of times you may be doing it unknowingly. We want you to know and be aware that you're actually doing it, and to actually do it more intently, so that so it can be translated, and you can recognize those opportunities when all these different things that you've been experiencing and developing as far as skills and experience can be translated into these unique opportunities that typically present themselves, but that we overlook because we're so narrowed in our focus in on that one thing that we really want to be good at, or that one thing that we want to be doing. Like, I was begging for years to be a motivational speaker, but I never thought about and realized until later in my life that being a world-class runner, having big dreams, developing my skill set as a writer has all been prepared me for being a confident motivational speaker and a great presenter. And so now I'm on that path much later in life than I was hoping to be, but I'm more prepared for it because of all those other things. So I'm excited to dive into this further because there is a lot to unpack here for sure.
Absolutely. And we talk all the time about with Go Be More is chasing your dreams. And the simple reality also for many people is they might not know what that dream is yet. And the reality of that is that's also normal. And one of the best ways to find that dream, or to confirm that it's what you really want to do, is to develop skills that relate to it, that complement that dream, that thing you want to pursue, is to dive into something that's going to help you get there. And if you're thriving doing that, and you're developing that skill, and you find yourself going further down that path and going faster, maybe it's the right decision. And if it's not, that skills can still develop, can still benefit you somewhere in the future, but it's going to also help you to figure out what is the right path for yourself, right? And let's wrap this one up. But I think for everybody, go check out the blog post we wrote about that kind of shows the Newman Design Squiggle. The links will be in the show notes. I think it's really worth taking a look at it and just actually having it in your mind as a visual. Seeing it and knowing what it looks like will change the way you understand our conversation that you heard today, because you have to have that visual image to sort of rely on to really truly understand it. I think from there, the other concept that we talked about of the skills network and developing your network of skills is, in the next episode, we'll get into some of these skills that I call multiplier skills and talk about why they're so much more valuable than some others. But in the meantime, you can do a bit of thinking about yourself, a little introspection, a little skills inventory, and you'll realize that you have so many skills that you might not have actually thought about before. And the combination of those skills is some combination is probably what's making you successful in the areas where you're successful. And if you can identify skills that are complementary, but that you can make stronger, or that you can connect in a better way, that is a surefire way to increasing your chances of success in whatever you're doing right now.
Man, so well said, Bryan. I love it. I love it. Oh, you hit the nail on the head.
All right, John. Wow. Thanks. So that does it for this episode of the Go Be More podcast. You can find the links to any articles or items that we referenced in the show notes. Don't forget to like and subscribe on iTunes or your podcast player. A rating really does help others find the show. For John, I'm Bryan. We are what the world is chasing, and we hope this podcast helps you become what the world is chasing too.